My name is Ivan Font, student of the Lean Kanban University. And today I'm going to talk to you about 2 points. Share with you the lessons learned at the Dreams of the Geo, where we implemented enterprise service planning. And share with you as well the challenges that we have at Best Day Travel Group. Yes, one in Barcelona and the other one in Cancun. Not the 2 very bad places to be. So back in the Lean Kanban conference in San Diego in 2016, for those of you that were there, I was sharing with you the details of this company called Dreams of the Geo, an online travel agency, which was big back then, was 2,000 people. They had around 50 teams. You remember? Of course you did. It's a company that grew very rapidly. It was a big company, right? And by growing very fast, organically and through acquisitions, but without taking into account the different internal processes, they were found, or we were found back then, into this, right? Slow product development processes, complex dependencies between the teams, very long prioritization processes, strange way of estimating the projects, silo cultures, right? The left hand doesn't know what the right hand does, and there were no measurements, right? Raise your hand if you have seen this before. Yeah. So for them, that was the drivers of the change. That's why we needed to change, right? They wanted to become small, but small in the way of working, right? Small so they can have better communication, small so they can have better transparency, knowing who does what, and small so they can be quick again and speed up the development process, right? This is what we wanted to be again. So the approach that we used back then was from a very, just coming from a kata talk, from very kata, okay, a current condition and a target condition. Cool, it seems easy, from A to B, right? So for us back then was, okay, we have to achieve autonomous teams. We have to achieve teams that actually can make their own decisions based on business KPIs and should, and that be it. That will become, that's our goal. So in order to do that, we established a vision, which was we wanted to become an organization that rapidly develops, learns, and innovates, and is very customer-centric. That was our vision back then. And we established ourselves then that the best way to do that was creating first, breaking those interdependent teams that we had into cross-functional teams, right? After the cross-functional teams, we thought that we would then create a product organization that would support those autonomous teams. That was the approach that we used back then. And in order to do the first step, we broke the silos. We created also some services teams to support those cross-functional teams, right? And just by doing that, we increase the teams, increase in their communication. We reduced the number of dependencies. We broke some of the silos that we had between the teams, right? So that for us, it worked. Okay, that's cool. The second step was the creation of this product organization, where we brought those cross-functional teams and we did a pilot test with 3 of them that represented the majority of the teams. And we assigned some agile coaches to them to become their journey and connected them to business. And we had established some business KPIs, so we thought that we were cool, right? Teams connected to business through business KPIs. Now we see that already that is a line of conflict as well. But back then, we thought that was the best idea. We sent everyone for ESP training, all the management layer and all the product owners back then. And all the teams were sent to Kanban, and Kanban training, and also the Kanban system design setup, the static, right? So we brought David and gave us training for 50 people, and we set up an ongoing training sessions with the teams, right? And we were taught on what is ESP. We were taught on ways to do fitness for purpose, what it means to deal with that strategy, risk management, planning, scheduling, forecasting, and services. If you have that together with a framework, which was the ESP cadences, where not only we deal with at team level things that needs to be done, but also how we can improve those things and to make sure that we do the right things. So that was good. And just sometimes after that, by measuring the flow efficiency of the local teams and the customer, on average, we had that. We had accomplished a 44 and a 20%. Coming from, at the beginning, I remember 3 or 4%, right? In about less than a year, probably. For those of you who don't know what it is, flow efficiency, very quickly, you have flow, you have the local lead time or the customer lead time, right? And the flow efficiency, it is the working time divided by the calendar time, or the lead time of that, right? So anyway, that product organization, the creation and the support of the ESP training, it gave us to start talking on the same language. We would start to see product owners that would start talking about, oh, this feature is a table stakes. This feature is a spoiler. So a common language was established, which was a very good thing, right? The teams setting up the business KPIs, the truth is that it is hard. You had to actually explain to developers what's a business KPI or what's a KPI itself, right? But once they understand that, once they have this aha moment, they're on board and their creativity is very high. So that was also accomplished with together making sure that there is a framework of feedback loops between the teams to make sure that we got the strategy right. So that was back then, and that's where I left it. And my lessons learned from that are the following ones. One is you have to remember that when you introduce a change, you will always create chaos, right? That as a coach, they tell you, and you experiment and experience that, right? For me, it was very visual always to help and explain that based on very talented people like Virginia Satir with their J-curve or the learning curve, okay? Where you have a normal status quo, introduce a foreign element, and that foreign element will meet resistance. That foreign element will resist to a chaos. And it depends how deep the change is, right? The deeper the J-curve is, until it becomes part of the understood, part of the transformation, integrated into what it is, the new status quo. That I have seen over and over again, even with the smallest change. But what's the trick there? What's my lesson learned there? It is to do small changes continuously. Not big changes, but small changes. Unfortunately, the management also always asks you for the big changes, right? So as much as you can do it small. If you have different changes, that's a good thing. So you can actually divert a little bit the direction where you want to go sometimes. But make them to be evolutionary rather than revolutionary. The second point is that you will always find a social hierarchy in the teams or in the organization. You will always find that the identity that David was talking this morning, right? That, for me, relates very much to, for instance, Maslow, that tell us, right? That tell us that we have a belonging needs. The teams likes to belong to a team, but likes to belong to be somebody on that team, right? And breaking that social hierarchy will create resistance, right? Will create passive-aggressive people. So you have to identify them. The recommendation is initially respect that social hierarchy. don't come just with the changes, actually, at least initially. Then the next one is to start with what you have now. I related to Kota and the recipe of the 8 steps that some of you may know, right? That tells you you have to create this climate. You have to create an urgency, right? To engage the company and implement the change. But my experience is that when you do that, you actually find that the management do not want to create that sense of urgency. They do want to change, and they do want to change fast, right? And quickly. But the creation of this climate for what Kotler suggests, at least in some of the companies that I've been, doesn't work that well. So my lessons learned there is start with what you have now, but make sure that you have the buy-in of the top management and the CEO. Yes, you can do transformation bottom-up, so top-down. Top-down, at least you have to have the sponsorship. Then the other guru that I always take into account, Peter Kirschbaumer, right? That always tells you, stop the blah, blah, blah bullshit, right? Focus on that there is no recipe. Identify the driver for the change that you have. Measure what you do, right? Invest on Einheit, or invest in teams cohesion, on the team's identity, the importance of that, and manage the expectations. Obviously, he's a little bit better, good looking, right? So that's the lessons learned that I took 2 years ago, let's say, right? So, okay, back to my new challenge now. So I'm gonna be in a new place. If you wanna know what happened to dreams, very quickly, right? They're around at 50% of flow efficiency, they were telling me, right? From the approach that they had to achieve autonomous teams, guess what? It didn't work so well, right? Not 100% autonomy. They have to have a balance, right? Realizing that there is a correlation with Melvin's Conway's law, right? That says that organizations that designs a system will produce always a structure that is a copy of the communications organization structure, right? So by realizing that, they focus more on the communication between the teams, right? On the social networking, so important that actually Patrick was saying today in his talk, right? They moved away from autonomous teams to try to think more on a system thinking, on domains, on identify end-to-end value chains, right? Thanks to Peter sharing with me, saying, yes, at team level, it does work nicely. At domain level, you have to focus more on operational excellence. And at enterprise level, you have to think more on Kaizen culture and on product thinking. So, back again to the challenge. Sorry, went too fast. The challenge is in Mexico, in Cancun. And that would be my actually title. Say, what if the Mexican culture would eat the enterprise service planning for breakfast, inspired by Peter Drucker, right? Best Day is another online travel agency, the biggest in Mexico and one of the biggest in LATAM, based in Cancun. Over 2,500 people in 11 countries, more than 1 million flights they sell, more than 1 million tours, and more than 1 million transfers. They sell more than 5 million hotel nights. So they have six different line of businesses, the B2Cs, B2Bs, a voyage for millennials, a joint venture with Mexico, transfers, and white labels. I was wondering, before going there, how is their culture? And whether if Best Day, which was their identity, right, to take into account. And by taking into account, I remember one of the talks from David that was saying, be careful, because we see on some countries where they are more conservative versus some liberal, they have that have better agile adoption is the ones that have higher trust. And he was putting us this map saying, we see that Latin America is pretty much a low trust quadrant. So in there, the adoption is harder. So for me, it was an epiphany that we were saying this morning. Right? For me, it was like, all right, I'm setting myself to a challenge. So what else should I take into account, right? I heard that the companies are very hierarchical and top-down, right? They can be very bureaucratic. You will find a silo mentality, a culture of fear. They have a funny sense of humor, very welcoming, and careful with the ahorita, with the mañana, and careful with the detalle. That was the selling speech of the CTO that hired me. I said, all right, yes, I mean, the ahorita, yes, I experienced that. If you rush to a hospital with a kidney stone attack, and the nurse tells you, no worries, ahorita, we will fix you. Really, you want the ahorita to be now, right? And when they come to you with a detalle, they say, you know, Ivan, there is a detalle, is a detail. You have a small detail, that's a big problem, right? So things to take into account. And once in there, things that I found, right? First, I found many shadow teams in the organization. If you know what that means, I found, for instance, in IT, that they had their own HR team, small HR team, that had nothing to do with HR of the company. Or they have a finance team that had nothing to do with the finance. But looking at other business teams, I found developers that were no part of IT, right? Then I also found what I becoming the usual suspects, right? And by doing that, I said, all right, hold on, ring a bell, right? I know those symptoms I know, I've been there before. So the approach should be rather easy, or at least similar, right? Conserve a target condition, current condition, and a target condition. In there, the target condition is different. The vision is actually to have an organization that is business-minded, right? That we focus on value, on what we do, right? That we are lean and agile, that we actually are fast, right? Transparent, and very customer-centric. That's what we want it to be. And from having highly interdependent teams, the main pain there was the high demand that the teams were supporting, right? In one part of the department, so 72 projects, I think, with 60 developers, right? And the first step that we set in order to have this product organization that would actually support the vision, we set up ourselves to, okay, let's shape the demand, right? Let's create this sort of a project-based organization, actually, to shape the demand at portfolio level. So this is what we did first. Start sharing with everyone, stop starting and start finishing, right? They all like that. Easy to say, hard to do, right? At portfolio level. So we created this sort of pod model where we had cross-functional teams for a project, and we would give them the space. So before they were, in different locations of the office, we put them together, right? Give them the tools and a clear purpose of what they were doing, right? And by doing that, yes, the team actually experienced a much better experience of working together, which then most of the projects actually went faster, right? So we sort of stopped the bleeding. So sort of because not everyone was happy. Obviously, the ones that were decision makers before, they weren't so far. And you could have people making noise saying, I don't understand this model, right? That was the first step that made sense in order to shape the demand. The second step that we took is the piloting of the product organization. So we took one of these business lines, the B2C, right? And we set ourselves, thanks to and inspired by Christophe Accoyans, we set ourselves actually a guide, said and we discussed it and agreed. Actually, you have two of the main guys there, the head of product management in there, the head of development, where we sat with this guide and established an agreement that we will follow with the team and so on, right? Thanks to that, we could say and see where we are at any given time of the different items. We measure them, and thanks to this conference, now I can actually shape the measurement and focus and ask the guy over there, Bernardo, what is happening? We are dropping on productivity. No, it's just Eastern. So the pilot results set by the team, it is that we had achieved a greater communication, at least at team level. We are talking about 3 teams, 27 or 29 people, right? Better transparency, a greater commitment from the teams, greater visibility, greater focus on user experience, better balance between demand and their capacity, much higher frequency of the delivery. So the graphs in there. And the collaboration between them increases. Teams that were sometime before sort of a silo, the UX team and the development team, they were in different buildings. So we brought them together, right? The initial numbers in there is 7.1, but very recent still. But let's say the tangibility of the change is there. So the next step that we did is to start rolling out this product organization, right? We started with training them at a team level, team by team. We start also training them, the product managers, on other aspects of the flow, on design thinking, on lean startup, right? Still, in order for them to actually identify ideas and to take them into opportunities. So I sort of inspired by a strategizer, I changed what they put Scrum into Kanban, right? But those help understand set up the training program that we have. So we roll out some events to explain to the teams what they were doing. We set up actually symbolic sort of a manifesto that we want to become lean and agile, signing by the CEO and the vice president. The CEO is just very, very tall, right? And we started Kanbanizing the teams, Kanbanizing the offices, right? Several teams. I think it's like 13, like a cluster, and then it's like 23 teams at the moment, right? But the beauty of that is that they made it. It's not me telling them or the other agile coach telling them, but it's just showing the value, and they are up for it. And when they understand it, they are very creative, right? They are experiencing on how to visualize the different classes of services, right? There are some of them, they embrace their identity all the time, right? So we are the flight teams. This is us, right? Other ones are local, right? So these are just some examples of some of the teams, right? How they feel about documentation and analysis, or prioritization, deploying or being deployed. So it's fantastic how actually these guys are very creative, right? We also established some rules. It's only 2 guys, 2 of us, and 2 other helpers that are helping us temporarily for 3 months. So we have to start being creative and establishing some tools of communication with the teams. So we are experimenting on, if you see from the guide that I showed you from Christophe Accoyans, right, on preparation, setup, kickstart, boost, and continuous improvement. We said, okay, so I don't know how to do that. The different practices, so we establish them and whether they need help or whether we are working on it, right? So it is like a map for us, very easy to identify. what we are working on, is it working or not working, and so on, right? We are investing in the social power of being viral, right? So we started the link office, so the different product managers can share their knowledge, so the different head of development can share all together what's working, what's not working, right? Still early days in there. From promoting with reading clubs, right? In order to promote what Patrick was saying, right? Flow, learning, collaboration. So the fourth step that we are doing, which is very relevant to this conference all the time, by Klaus and by David this morning, right? On working on the culture aspect of the management, right? They're saying we need to have their buy-in, and they always say, yes, please change them, right? So in there, we are working the same on highlighting the importance of their leadership and on the values and behaviors that we have, right? And with them, we sort of did the same, sort of a kata, saying, okay, let's identify what do we mean in here at the moment by leadership. What do we mean by communication, or by quality, innovation, or by being customer-centric? What do we mean by that? And then how we are, what is the analysis? How we are at the moment, and very important, how we want to be, right? And ask them which are the KPIs that would tell us actually that are a good indicator to go from A to Z. So this is another important aspect that we are doing, working with them at that level, right? For me, the image of the iceberg that has been used several times in culture change, it does help me in a very pragmatic and easy way of that I have to do things that are visible and things that are invisible, right? If I focus too much in one, the other one will suffer and you don't see. So you have to find your balance. So some of them, they call me Bob the Builder because I'm actually removing walls, literally, in the office, right? You have to have that, right? You have to invest in having, proto-Kanbans on the walls, having the teams to experience to have kits that to actually put the walls up, right? You have to have a link office and make it visible. So all that visibility, as well as all the importance of the culture change that needs to happen, right? So how is Best Day adopting so far the Kanban practices, right? I would say that visualizing, so-so. I was saying so-so. When you come to say the importance of visualizing, the importance of transparency, the importance of measuring, then you find that measuring why you want to measure. You want to measure me, sort of a discussion. So, but once they understand, they have this aha moment there. They are your heroes. They are your ambassadors. They want to visualize everything. You have seen some of, right? In terms of limit whip, is I think is the hardest of them all. They cannot say no, right? It's very hard for them to say no. It is hard for everyone to say no, right? But very hard, and used to be overloaded of work. So, but managing flow, again, is another aha moment. But I think that is again the same as in Spain. Is counterintuitive, some of these things that we say, right? Less is more. Try to convince them and that they see it. It takes a little bit of time. Making policies explicit, yes, please. You have to be super mega explicit there. You actually have to tell them what to do and what not to do. So you have to create your backlog of things to do and your anti-backlog of things not to do. Literally. Implementing flipped loops, yes, but in a sandwich style. Good news, bad news, good news. That for me was different experience from going from Europe, where you can just tell him but it's not working. You have to find your ways of saying it, right? Improve collaboratively and evolve experimentally. Gosh, that's hard, but that's, I think, hard everywhere. Set up the right metrics, right? And understand the metrics. So that's regarding adopting. What are the next steps? The next steps for us is to continue working on the leadership and in the organizational culture change that we want to do. That's the track, one of the main tracks. Promoting the social networking inside the company to promote the change, right? Through these activities, right? Something that I want to explore more. Implement the ESP cadences, not only at team level, but more at the operational review, right? You find that they do have them in other shape or form, they call differently, but to review them and to shape them, right? Kanbanize the organization using the flight levels. It helps, it's clearly, right? Whether you want it at operational, tactical, or strategic level. And thanks to the KAM to review the strategy where we want to be. That will help me a lot, right? So to the question whether if this Mexican culture will eat enterprise service planning for breakfast, the answer is no. It is actually proven, right? Thank you.